Welcome everybody. Welkom allemaal. This is a new experiment for us technically, so I'd just like to check with our attendants whether you can hear us. Can you hear me? And how will I find out? I see some hands raised. That looks good.
Yeah.
What do you think, Milou?
Yes, I think we're good.
Okay, excellent. Welcome everybody to this online talk. My name is Femke Heitema, and usually I'm director of the City Museum of Gouda in Holland. But today I am a part of the ICOM Netherlands board. And ICOM, what does ICOM want to do? I think most people know ICOM through the white plastic card, which offers you free entrance to museums all over the world. But we're actually a sort of a group of museum professionals doing this all as volunteers and with just one goal, which is to inspire all our colleagues with museums. And what we'd like to do as ICOM Netherlands is inspire you, our Dutch colleagues, with inspiration from museums all over the world, and in this case, across the pond in the US. And I'm so very, very grateful that we're here today with 6 speakers in 90 minutes. So it's quite a challenge. All speaking on children and families in museums. So we're going to hear experiences, best cases, worst cases, advice. I can't wait to hear everything our colleagues in America have to tell us and share with us. So we have 90 minutes and we're going to have 6 people speaking to us, and afterwards there'll be time for questions. So if you have any questions, put them in the chat or just save them in your head until the end of about an hour, and then we'll have time for a discussion, which we'll really look forward to. We are taping the talk as well, because there's lots of people who are interested and who can't be with us today. So this is one way to even share the knowledge further. Well, before we start, just a very quick note on how this came about. I met our first speaker and moderator in New York at a conference organized by ICOM, the International Committee for City Museums. When I say I met him, I must say I listened to him in awe. And afterwards I approached him. I said, look, would you be willing to one day do your story for our Dutch colleagues online, and can we arrange this? And look where we are now. He is with us and he brought 5 colleagues, and I'm very, very grateful to him. The person I'm talking about is Affleck III, who is Executive Director of the Association of Children's Museums and is co-chair of ICOM US. And well, he's the boss today, so take it away, Arthur.
Well, Femke, thank you for that wonderful, warm introduction. It was a pleasure to meet you and to chat with you, and I'm so thrilled that something I shared seemed to be of benefit. I am, as Executive Director of the Association of Children's Museums, I have the pleasure of serving and supporting all of these wonderful museums in the US and around the world. In fact, we serve the association over 35,000 museum professionals in about 400 museums in all 50 states and in 11 countries. So we are decidedly international, which is another reason why I'm thrilled to be engaged with our Dutch colleagues. I actually visited Amsterdam once some years ago and had a wonderful visit to Amsterdam, and it's been too long, so I need to come back to Amsterdam and Rotterdam and certainly see Femke and Gouda. So we'll see if we can work all that out. We represent science centers and children's museums, mostly children's museums. And you'll learn today that our museums have a number of things in common, but they're all unique because they serve the communities in which they reside. They address the needs of the local communities. There are different sizes, different approaches to the work, but they all work to support children and families with hands-on, interactive, experiential kinds of exhibits and programs. We use playful learning as a tool to engage children and families. And our work is intergenerational, which is to say, it's not enough just to engage the child. We engage the caregiver and the parents as well, so that the lessons can be taken from the Children's Museum to the home to continue to engage children in learning, in discovery, and in personal growth and development. We do a lot around what we call social and emotional development in our museum, school readiness programs, literacy, all of that. You hear all of that today. But I just want to, before I introduce my colleagues, just want to say, I know this not just from an intellect standpoint, although I do have a master's degree in education from a very fine US university, but as a child growing up in Brooklyn, New York, first 10 years of my life living with my parents who didn't finish secondary school, never went to college, worked modest jobs. So we were, in a word, poor. But my parents had the presence of mind to expose us to culture and information and knowledge. And I remember them taking us to the Brooklyn Children's Museum. And while I didn't have the words to explain what that meant at the time, I remember feeling, coming from public housing, which was dirty and dangerous and dark at the time for me, to a place of light and warmth and acceptance and discovery and learning and in a word, joy. I remember those experiences and feeling like I want to come back here more often. I want this feeling to continue. It turns out that the Brooklyn Children's Museum happens to be the first children's museum in the world. So I was just fortunate it was there. And so as I became an adult and had my own children, took them to many, many children's museums and other museums. And we also, we consider ourselves that third space between home and school. You know, where can you take kids and families so they can continue to grow and explore? You can come to a children's museum. So I come to this, and I have now in this role in 3 years, probably visited over 100 children's museums all over this country and outside the country, in the UK, in Singapore, in, you know, just so many other places I've been, to see the joy, to see the difference we make in the lives. I will also say this before I turn it over to my colleagues. Increasingly in the US, natural history museums, art museums, and others send their people to our conference to learn more about how children's museums serve children and families. Some of these museums, like the Metropolitan Museum of Art, have even opened a new children's wing, a whole separate section for children and families, because they realize they must be more intentional. Children are not just little adults. They are unique personalities that need to be engaged in a particular way with intention to help them grow and learn. So you will hear a lot of that from my colleagues. So I'm just thrilled to be here as a servant leader with these brilliant leaders who really have the knowledge. They're doing the work on a day-to-day basis, and I think you'll be thrilled. You're in for a treat. Hope you'll write down your questions because they have all of the answers. These people here, they have all of the answers. So I'm convinced. So what I'm going to ask them to do is introduce themselves very quickly. We'll go around, and then after their introductions, then we'll start talking about their specific museums, what makes them different, what are their feature programs, what are some of the exciting things they're doing in the museum, in the community, et cetera. And I think you'll just be excited and pleased by what you hear, and you'll take something away that may inform your museum practice wherever you are in the Netherlands. So I'm going to start with Denise Adusei, who is at the Bronx Children's Museum. Denise, please introduce yourself and say just a bit about your wonderful museum.
Well, thank you so much, Arthur. And thank you, everyone, for inviting me and the Bronx Children's Museum to this conversation. I'm very excited to represent the Bronx Children's Museum. My formal title is the Executive Director of the Bronx Children's Museums, sometimes I call myself mayor of Little Town. Sometimes I'm the chief Imagineer. I have so many different roles here, and we're just excited to be here. But thank you for having us. We're excited to talk about all the wonderful things that we do here at the museum. All my colleagues do at their museum, but thank you.
Thank you, Denise. Rayanne at the Children's Museum of Houston. Would you introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Welcome, everyone. I'm Rayanne Darensbourg, and I'm with the Children's Museum Houston. And Houston is one of the largest, fourth largest, and one of the most diverse cities here in the U.S. I've been in this role for 18 months, and I look forward to sharing more about our museum. We're 45 years young in the community, and we see over 750,000 visitors annually.
Thank you. Joe Hastings is with us from Explora. Joe Hastings, please introduce yourself and tell us where you are.
Hello, everyone. I'm Joe Hastings, and I am one of the two co-executive directors of Explora. I've been here 12 years. Explora's been around 30 plus years. We're in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in the Southwest. We're going to host, by the way, the Association of Children's Museums Conference in the coming year, May. So please come on out and see us, and we'll talk more in a little bit.
I love that commercial. May 14, 15, 16, Albuquerque, New Mexico, the 2025, the ACM Interactivity Conference. You're all welcome. Go to our website, childrensmuseum.org, for more information. I'm sorry for that. Okay, Dené Mosier. Dené, introduce yourself, please.
Hello, everyone. It's such a privilege to be here today. I'm Dené Mosier. I'm the CEO of the Kansas Children's Discovery Center. So smack dab in the center of the United States is my museum. We are by far in the smallest community. Our population is about 125,000. We see about that many visitors each year at our museum. We are in an area that visitors have to travel long distances to get to us, and that means sometimes we need to take our show on the road and go into those communities.
Thank you, Dené. And Joe Hastings and Dené Mosier both are on the board of directors of the Association of Children's Museums, so I appreciate them being here. And last but not least, Carter Polakoff from Port Discovery.
Hi, good morning. Actually, it's probably not morning over there, right? So it's nice to see everybody. I'm Carter Polakoff. I'm the president and CEO of Port Discovery Children's Museum. We are a children's museum located in Baltimore, Maryland, in a very urban area, center of the city. We see about 250,000 visitors a year. Our focus is really on multi-generations, so caregivers and their children. And I'm really excited to tell you more about our museum when we get our couple minutes of chit chat, but nice to see everybody.
Thanks, Carter. So let's keep that order. Denise, do you want to tell us all about the wonderful, beautiful Bronx Children's Museum?
Absolutely. Thank you. So the Bronx Children's Museum, we just celebrated our first year as a museum. We are in New York City. I'm not sure how familiar people are with the Bronx. The Bronx is one of the 5 boroughs of New York City. We serve 1.4 million people here in the Bronx. New York City itself is about 9 million people. I think in our first year, we've seen over 125,000 children and families. And we're in a borough that is 90% people of color, 54% are Spanish speakers, and another 29% are African American or of African descent. So we have a very, very diverse community. Our museum can't be taken out of the Bronx and put somewhere else, unless you really love the Bronx. Because when you walk into our museum, you see the Bronx. You walk into the casita area, which is very specific to the Puerto Rican culture here in the Bronx. And the kids can pretend play in the casita. We have a replica of the Harlem River, which is right outside our door. We made sure that we celebrate all cultures here. Our motto is that we exhibit possibilities, we exhibit possibilities, we illuminate pathways, and celebrate all children and cultures. and we take that very seriously. And so we exhibit possibilities by a number of different ways. Our exhibits here at the museum are made by local artists that are from or connected to the Bronx. Especially in this one year, we're in a community that has been historically excluded. So we made sure to highlight the artistry that we have here in the Bronx. We have our art residents is an artist from our local neighborhood, but also a children's book author and illustrator. So he comes regularly and our kids get to play and create art with him. We have his art from the time he was 9 years old until now. He's now, I'm not going to mention his age, but he's over 40. And kids can see how he's progressed as an artist. We also designed our museum in a very special way to be inclusive of people who have various abilities. Most people don't know, I'm visually impaired. I can't see depth, and usually I don't tell people that. So for us, it's very, very important that anyone who walks into the museum can enjoy the museum. We have special days that are for children who need assistance in terms of just getting around the museum. And then we also, when we say we illuminate possibilities, we also work very closely with schools. So we have over 50 schools that we bring our STEAM programming into the schools. We started off as a program on a bus, and we used to travel from schools and festivals and parades while we were building this museum. And we've never stopped. Our bus is not working right now, and we're getting a new bus, but we still go into the schools. We bring programming, art programming, science programming into the schools. We also have about 500 schools that we've seen this year that have come here for field trips. So we support schools in many, many ways. And then we also partner with lots of local organizations. We had this wonderful, wonderful program recently with migrant families who just are recent arrivals to New York City. And we had a special day just for those kids because they've had a difficult year, a lot of our children. We also work with shelters and recently released individuals who are transitioning back into the community. So for us, it's very important for us that we're celebrating every child and we're celebrating every culture and we're recognizing all structures of families. I could go on forever, but I know I want to give everyone an opportunity to be able to talk. But yeah, we started on a bus and now we're here. We have a whole building and we're very proud of that. But we invite you, if you're ever in New York City, to please come visit. I have family in Rotterdam. That's where my father grew up. And so I'm really excited that I'm here and being able to connect with your community.
All right, Denise, two other things I want you to share. One, you are an author. Tell us what the name of your book.
Oh, Arthur, it's right here. So I'm also a children's book author. I am the author of Cesaria Feels the Beat. It's a story about a deaf girl who wants to participate in Carnival, which Carnival it's a very important celebration you see throughout the African diaspora. But she's deaf and she feels music through her feet. And the director wants everyone to wear the same shoes. And so she tries to conform and wear shoes like everybody else. But at the end, she has to kick off. I'm giving away the ending. She kicks off her feet, kicks off her shoes, and all her friends join in as allies. And they all perform with no shoes on. For me, I grew up with a cousin who was deaf, and it's really important for me, as I mentioned in our museum, that all children can access the museum, but I also think every child should see themselves in art and see themselves in story and media. And so when we say we exhibit possibilities, we go all in. We write our books, we display them all throughout the museum, and then every single person here in the museum is a role model for the children who walk into the museum.
And the last thing, Denise, tell us about your book bodega.
The book bodega. So the Bronx never had a children's museum. I mean, children's bookstore. First, we didn't have a children's museum. And secondly, we did not have a children's bookstore. So the first children's museum in the Bronx opened the first bookstore in the Bronx. And so with a little bit over a month and a half old, we've distributed over 5,000 books to kids in our community. So every child that comes in for a field trip, they leave with a book. They might leave with my signed book. They also come in. We have a great relationship with book distributors, and we're making sure that every child leaves with a book, and that book ownership is very important to us. The Bronx has a very low literacy rate. 70% of kids in the 3rd grade in in the Bronx are not reading at the appropriate level. So we are attacking every single need in terms of, and when we talk about our mission, it's really important for us to really partner with the schools. And I know that we're also an educational institution. I see our museum as one big preschool classroom where you can do sensory play or pattern identification. We have a book nook in our book bodega. We explore, we have experiments that kids partake in. So for us, we're a museum, but we are an educational institution. We're an educational lab for the children of the Bronx.
Thank you, Denise. And she used the term STEAM programming. And just in case you don't know, our museum's STEAM stands for science, technology, engineering, the arts, and mathematics. And with that, I'm going to go to Planet Houston, to the Children's Museum of Houston, and have Rayanne. I visited her museum several times, most recently a few months ago. Just an amazing place. Rayanne, tell us about Houston.
Sure. And I'll share some slides as well, just to give a
Great.
visual. I hope this works, everyone. And I'm sharing the
we
right
can see it.
screen.
We can see
Okay,
it.
wonderful. I'm sharing the right screen now. I just have to figure out which one to flip to. Okay, here we go. See if that works. So I do appreciate everyone's patience with me as I figure this out. Here we go. So the Children's Museum Houston is located in Texas. I should have said that earlier. And the museum is sized like Texas. We are rather large. I wanted to give this visual to you. We're 95,000 square feet of space, and we're located in the museum district of Houston. So surrounded within walking distance to a number of museums. Our architecture is unique, and Robert Venturi is the renowned architect who designed our museum. And it was deliberately done to be an extremely playful version of serious buildings. When you think of libraries and courthouses with columns that were very statuesque, holders of knowledge, Greek architecture, but everything was oversized. And it was so interesting because at the time in Houston, the Museum of Fine Arts was being built, and it was being done in a very minimalist way. And Robert Venturi was known for anything but minimalist. His famous saying was, less is a bore. So it was all about things being really large and oversized, and we knew kids really were attracted to those type of things. So we look like a Greek building holder of knowledge, which we are. And then we have these wonderful kids that line us, which is a homage to Greek mythology and the Caratids. We have Cara Kids. So they're kids that hold up our building and our community. So what really drives our work, and Denise shared this as well, we have a tagline, can your mind come out to play? So we really like to make sure that we are engaging our visitors and our parents and teachers and caregivers in a way that their minds feel as though they can free themselves and really engage with our work and with the museum. So a kids committee, a formal kids committee, guides our work. We've had this committee for many years, since the 80s, and they serve as advisors. We prototype bits before an exhibit hits the floor. We go through many iterations, and they provide advice to us. And it is a formal structure where there's a president, there's a vice president, and that they can grow in their leadership as kids as well. And we also have on the other side a formal evaluation committee that is led by Dean of University of Houston College of Education. And we have a number of PhDs, those that are well versed in the world of evaluation, that helps us create the type of tools that we can use to evaluate our programs and our engagement with others. And that data helps us to drive, excuse me, our story. Here in the States, we write a lot of grants to philanthropic organizations, especially here in Houston, which is a very philanthropic community. And those data points help us to tell our story and secure the resources to keep our museum going. This is just a super quick example of some of our spaces. As I shared with you, we see we're rather large, but that's not unusual for Houston to see, or Texas to see, over 750,000 visitors. A very diverse population here in Houston that represents the world. And one of the things that we're learning to do a lot better is be able to have our exhibits and our gallery space and our programming in more diverse languages. We've always been bilingual, English and Spanish, but we're recognizing that we need to be able to go beyond those two languages. 40% of our visitors come in free of charge. Part of our mission is making sure that we are meeting families and kids in a space that where they can come to the museum regardless of cost. Cost should not be a barrier. So we're very intentional with that. We partner with over 1,000 nonprofits, and those are service organizations in Houston that serve people that are experiencing hardship. And we partner with them and make sure that they have passes that they can distribute to families to come to the museum. We also have an on-site public library partnership, and we have a number of outreach in the community. Something that's unique for our museums is you'll see here, we have our educators on the floor. So the three people you see here are all educators. They have education backgrounds. They come with a diverse number of experiences. For example, this young lady in the middle, she's actually working on her PhD right now at a local university. Pilar here, she has a background in arts education, and they're engaging, they help create programming, and then they engage directly with our visitors. And here's some more examples of our lab space and even our maker space of educators engaged with visitors. A few things that stand out for us that we're very proud of, and I say stand out for us, but it's not unusual for museums, I think, in the United States, is to engage with school groups. So school groups visit us far and wide, and they have an opportunity. Sometimes for us, we recognize that these kids that come with schools, sometimes this is their first visit to a museum, and that's so special to us. And we always make sure that they go back with passes that they can bring their parents and families back to the museum. These are just some examples. Sometimes we take over the street, and we have special community events. For example, Pi Day, always on March 14th. We hosted our 20th annual one this year. And that was during spring break time when schools are out for about a week. Part of our work is also just being a representation of our cultural space in Houston. So here you'll see Hanukkah being represented with a family that's here in Houston. So we, during the holiday season, we have seasons of sharing where families can share how they celebrate the holidays with their traditions in their home and bringing it to the museum. So this family, they were so excited to come and see themselves. So they worked with us for over a year and invited us into their home and shared their special traditions so that we can share with visitors. This is just another example of, this is Martin Luther King holiday, a young lady who's orator champ came, and she was just absolutely phenomenal, and kids just absolutely connect with hearing another youth voice and celebrating Dr. Martin Luther King's work with us. And then just real quickly, our outreach. Here's one of the things we recognize is that we have to be outside the walls of our museum. We have to take our museum on the road. So this is one example of an outreach in our science workshop in a local middle school. So these young people have all built something that was of interest to them. So this is very self-guided. What interests you? What do you aspire to be, and what would you like to design and make? And you'll see they've all come up with some different ideas and things that, and how, what a wonderful way to build confidence and to have a dream and see it come through. And here's another one in partnership with We have a lot of partnerships with local universities, and this is a partnership with parents are learning how to start STEM, and Arthur had shared that science, technology, engineering, and math, hands-on activities with their young children so that parents can start to build their ability to be their child's first and foremost teacher. That's a belief that we hold strongly here at the museum. And this is just another example of outreach in a school. So in the evenings, we take over the school with parents and teachers engaged with our hands-on tabletop activities. So this is our educator in the blue shirt, and he's brought these tabletop activities, and you'll see that it's just really hands-on engagement. And we love to see the parents as engaged with the kids and teachers. This has just been such a wonderful time for parents and teachers to get to know each other. So I'm going to stop right there. And I hope I didn't go over my 10 minutes, Arthur.
No, that was great. One thing you did not share that I will share is that Children's Museum Houston and Rayanne were the recent recipients of the National Medal from IMLS, celebrating excellence, one of the highest awards in our field. So all of our museums are great. This one got recognized with the medal. So congratulations, Rayanne.
Thank you. Very exciting for us and the community.
Yes. With that, let's go to Joe Hastings at Explora in Albuquerque. Tell us all about Explora.
Yeah, will do. And I'll bounce around, and I'm confident that if I miss something, Arthur will point it out. So this is really cool. Arthur, help me out here. Well, it's great to be able to learn so much from our colleagues, and I can't wait to come to the Netherlands and learn from you all. I've been to the Netherlands a handful of times. I've been in this field since the 90s. I worked in Switzerland at Technorama for a year, and early on I came and visited what was then New Metropolis. And I think it opened in the late 90s, is now Nemo, and know some of your colleagues, Andrea Bandelli and Marilyn von Bremen and Amit Toharhus and Paul Vogt. So I keep in touch with some of those people through Excite and ASTC and other associations. Yeah, our place, Explora, we're a science center and children's museum. It's maintenance this week, so I don't usually dress like this, but we close, for 1 week, we scrub everything, we paint, everything to keep it clean, because we have a smaller place by American standards. We're maybe 5,000 square meters, and we see about 350,000 people a year. Definitely a family center in a lot of ways, and I'll tell you how we've evolved over time. But yeah, we've been around since the 80s in one form or another. We were a little children's museum and a little science center, an early branch off the Exploratorium tree. And then there was an arranged marriage. The city brought us together to get this lovely building, which we've been in for 20 years. I got here about 12 years ago, and my co-executive director, she's been here now 22 years. We, in some ways, we're a startup in this building, kind of a restart, and we focused very much internally to be sure we had our core values determined. These days our core values, and we're a values-based organization. Community, learning, people, diversity, those change over time. The staff works on those every couple of years. We revisit. Over COVID, flexibility became an important word. People seeking flexibility, the organization needing flexibility, of course. Generosity has been a word that's come in and out as far as our core values go. All that's to say, we were very internally coherent at that time, but what we had done was inadvertently, we had turned away from the community. And so we were very proud of who we were. And for the people who came to us, we were excited they came to us. But for so many people who did not come to us, we really didn't care. And that's a strong statement and not quite fair. But it manifests, right? We get so focused internally on what we think is important, we aren't necessarily listening. So my colleague, Kristen Lee, and I decided to do a turning outward. And that journey now is a 10-year, 12-year journey, hundreds of listening conversations with different groups in the community, Anybody who calls himself a community or a group, we'd listen, we'd invite ourselves to their table, and we would ask a series of questions, all basically getting towards what kind of community would you like? What do you aspire to for yourself, your family, your neighbors, whatever group you draw yourself in? And we heard all kinds of things, you know, as you would, and so many beautiful and colorful stories. But it amazingly distilled down to 7 things, and 2 of them resonated with us. And one of them was that in New Mexico, we were not taking care of our youngest kids. So birth to 3, 4, 5, people said, we need better opportunities, equitable access to high quality early childhood education. So better taking care of our young ones. And then they said, we need to stick with kids longer. We need opportunities for our youth and for our teens. They're not staying in school. There aren't enough jobs. They need to be able to be on pathways to jobs that pay good money. And people were explicit. We need prosperity in our family, in our neighborhood, in our communities. And so we got to get on path for that. And so we said, and we heard, 6 other things, 5 other things, but those 2, we said, yeah, we work with kids, some young, some older. We were 5 to 12-year-olds and their caregivers at that time. That was our bell curve. And so we decided to stretch that. And that got us on a cradle through career STEAM learning journey. First, it was programmatic and audience alignment and partnership alignment. And, with hearing from Rayanne, and you'll hear from everybody, we partner. We can't do anything without partner. We can't get out of bed without partnering. It's just more fun when you do something with a partner, and certainly more impactful. So we started partnering. Over time, those programs then evolved into a cradle through career STEAM learning campus master plan. And so we have our one building, which is the Children's Museum and Science Center. And we decided, well, we're going to build a teen center and we're going to build a preschool. And although we would have liked to have built the preschool first, there's kind of a logic in the birth and all that. The money was sort of there for the teens. People wanted to see immediate results. You're going to make jobs, you can make kids get into jobs. So there was a little more funding there. We opened up X Studio. X Studio is our teen center, 800 square meters. So it's modest in size, makerspace, coding lab, some classrooms, small exhibition. The exhibition STEM in the Burke. Albuquerque, one of the nicknames is Burke. So science, technology, engineering, math in the Burke. And it's stuff that's happening here, but it's more the stories of the people doing that work with a lot of images and written and spoken stories, and then programs around that. So showing kids how they could be on those pathways too. And then Brillante Early Learning Center. We will break ground in two months on a, I know, right? $14 million center, 12 classrooms, 120, 140 kids, birth to kindergarten. We got impatient and we just opened it here. We took 2 of our classrooms. So we've now for a year and a half been doing preschool at Explora. We have a 2-year-old classroom. We have a 3 to 5-year-old classroom. This is free preschool. And our focus is again on that kind of improving educational outcomes and driving economic development. So these are all children of students at the local community college. And these students at the community college, one of the biggest reasons they drop out of community college is they don't have adequate childcare for their kids. And so this is good for the kids, and then it hopefully helps these parents stay in school, get their degrees, be able to earn some money. So I'll say we have some wonderful programs akin to what you'll hear about from our friends. We do statewide outreach. We're the One Science Center in New Mexico. New Mexico is a big state. So we have 6 or 7 trucks. We have 20 acres, and they get all around to the pueblos and to different libraries and else in schools and such. One other program, 2 programs I'll mention. A lot of work with schools, of course, a lot of work with families. One that brings them together that we're real proud of is called Family Science Nights. That's 50 nights a year, turning this place over to 2 schools each night. And they come, they own it. It's the kids, but it's the parents, aunts, uncles, cousins, and then the teachers, of course, and school staff. And so they own this place. That could be the kids' first exposure, certainly the parents' first exposure to Explora. Then what we do is, we sell memberships to our place. It's probably about $100 for a family for a year to come and enjoy Explora. We sell maybe 3,000 of those memberships, but coupled with family science nights and with those many, many partners, we give away family memberships. So we sell 3,000, but we give away 30,000 memberships a year. So that's roughly, if it's 5 or 6 people per family, that's 150, 180,000 people in New Mexico. New Mexico is about 2 million people who can come for free anytime and take advantage of Explora. So I'll say we believe that's our duty. Part of it is a very clear obligation because unlike some of the folks on the screen, but like many of you out there, we get state money and city money. So we get a third of our income from the city of Albuquerque. And over time, really most of our capital money to build buildings and such is public money. So whether it's city, county, state, federal. So it really is an obligation then to serve people. So I'll stop there. And Arthur, tell me 1 or 2 things I didn't say. What did I miss?
Thank you, Joe. Well, you did say your outreach is phenomenal. Joe's museum is one of the museums that visits every county in the state. They go all around. So yes, they do great things in the building. And this is a hallmark of our community. Joe is unique in that I don't know of another children's museum or science center that has a teen center. So that's new. And people are watching how he does. And if he does well, then people will follow and copy his model. So thank you, Joe, for stepping out on faith and listening to your community. And I was there for the opening of the teen center, and it was lovely. And I've been back since to see teens in it working on robotics programs and competitions, and just a joyful, exciting place. So thank you, Joe. And now another exciting place that I have had the privilege of visiting is the Kansas Children's Discovery Center. Dené, tell us all about your wonderful place in the middle of the country.
Absolutely. Thank you, Arthur. At the Kansas Children's Discovery Center, we believe that every child have the opportunity to have museum experiences. And so we're continually looking at ways to remove those barriers. And so like many of my partners have mentioned already today, we're thinking about, are there financial barriers? Are there ways that we can bring families for free? We have more than a dozen programs that last year resulted in over 40% of our visitors coming for free or reduced admission. A couple of those programs that are unique and are as a result of our listening to the community and asking how we can serve them and how we can keep children at the center of decision making are our Medical Warriors and our Play Free programs. We believe that cultural institutions have the opportunity to bring families together and strengthen those family units. And so one population that we were not serving were medically fragile children, children who were facing life-threatening illnesses, perhaps undergoing chemotherapy or radiation, and had a risk of the germs from crowds. And again, I mentioned we're a small institution. We only have about 10 full-time staff, which is actually a growth recently. But we started assigning individual families to our individual staff. And on times that we were closed to the public, we offer private visits for families who have children who are facing those challenges. And so for just a moment, those kids can kind of check their troubles and their illness at the door and come in with their family and have an experience like anyone else would. What we find is they spend time in our pretend doctor's office and they work through some of the feelings that they're having with the experiences they're having in life. We have children that have never been anywhere besides a doctor's office, their home, or the hospital, and we become an additional space. So as Arthur spoke to third spaces, we become a really important part of families' story. It's a place for them to find joy, and that's really kind of the center of what we do, is how do we create joy for families? Another population that in 2018 we began serving were children who have incarcerated parents. There are more incarcerated individuals in the United States than any place else. In the US, 1 in 28 children will experience parental incarceration, which means that they are separated from their parents, which creates a number of hardships for children. Kids who have incarcerated parents are 6 times more likely to be incarcerated themselves later. So recognizing that there are very few things we can do to change that, and what research tells us is it's strengthening family units and those positive connections that can come as a result of that. We began partnering with a women's prison in Kansas Again, we're rural. There's one in our entire state. And so mothers who are incarcerated have the opportunity to come to our museum on a day that we're closed to the public. It's just them and their children. And they spend the entire day together. They come in, they have breakfast, they paint on the walls. We have a gallery where they can paint. They build with blocks. They go outside. We have 4.5 acres. That's part of our outdoor exhibit area. So they ride bikes together. They blow bubbles. They do things that the children want to do. The children get to be in charge and lead the way. They're building those bonds. We do things on those days that look a little different than when we're open to the public. Sometimes they want their mom to do their hair. Very basic bonding experiences. And what we find is the families that participate in that, those moms, when they're surveyed, over 95% of them say it impacts their choices daily in the facility. They do different things so that they can come and be with their children. Their children see their mothers differently. They no longer have to go inside of a secure facility to spend time with them. They come. What we observe is children climbing up their moms and kissing all over and saying, I love you, I miss you. They're touch deprived. We're able to give them those opportunities. Because we're a statewide entity and we have a mobile museum that travels all over our whole state. We go into community centers, into school gymnasiums, spaces that we can set up our museum. We understood that there was an opportunity to take this program and grow it. And so we are now in 4 other communities that we allow fathers who are incarcerated to visit with their children. Since the 1st of January of this year, we've had the extraordinary privilege of watching 5 fathers meet their children for the very first time in person, because we were able to bring our museum, bring that cultural institution into a community, create a safe space that was completely focused on children, that was about joy. And we brought them together, the caregivers who otherwise would not have brought those children to visit their adult. And our position is these kids are serving a sentence along with their parents through no fault of their own. So when we can give them a positive, joyful experience, we can build upon that bond and hopefully mitigate some of the consequences that they suffer as a result of the separation from parental incarceration. So we're always asking the question, who else can we be serving? We're looking at ways that we can take the tools we have in our museums, implement them out into the community throughout our whole state, and enrich the lives of children and their families. Arthur?
Listen, you know, you're trying to make us cry here. I mean, this is emotional stuff. This is great. This is so wonderful, so wonderful. So one thing I'd love you just to share also in terms of your community work with partners. I was there for the wonderful celebration of the Brown versus Board of Education and Topeka experience. Just talk about how that came about and why the Children's Museum was involved and you had an exhibit at your museum, just as an example of community, you know, outreach and togetherness.
Absolutely. Again, it's about partners. It's how do we lift up those in the community? I think children's museums are a unique hub. We're anchors in our community, and it's an opportunity to elevate others and what's happening. The 70th anniversary of the Brown versus Board of Education decision happened here in Topeka, Kansas, which is where we stopped segregating schools and we began to have that change. We think that it's important to continue to have these conversations. And sometimes as children's museums, we have to walk into things that aren't necessarily all happy and sunshine, but they're opportunities to teach children to have voices, to teach children to become advocates, and to move for a better tomorrow. We have to empower children. So we had a unique opportunity to bring an exhibit here, to bring partners together. We worked with all of our local artists, with our other local museums, and elevated the work they were doing to tell a story that we think is really important for families to be talking about.
Thank you, Dené, for your courage in doing this work and you know, the hard work of bringing, you know, parents and kids together who are incarcerated. People forget that 95% of these folk who are incarcerated will come home one day. We want them to come home with skills, with compassion, with a reason to do the right thing by their families, and you're helping to make that happen. So I am so sorry, Carter, that you have to follow all of this, but guess what? I have been to Port Discovery. several times, and you've got great stuff going on. So Carter, tell us all about the great work at Port Discovery in Baltimore.
Well, thank you. I have to say, I thank you for this call because I've written down 50 ideas just from my colleagues alone, just sitting here. And so I love the medical warriors. We have a similar program at Port Discovery on Tuesday afternoons where we shut down and we invite hospitals with, patients, and, it may just be one child or two children. And I love medical warriors, Dené, so I may have to steal some of that language. But anyway, we are about 100,000 square feet of space here, which I was listening to Joe. So that's about 10,000 meters. Is that square meters, correct? To put that into, better language for our European visitors or listeners. We are in the heart of Baltimore City. Baltimore is 20% in the sort of poverty line. So we have a pretty significant level of families really suffering from pretty extreme poverty here. Homicide is the #1 killer of children in Baltimore City. And so gun violence and traumatic death is part of the reality of some of the families that we serve here. And I think one of the things that we really talk about throughout all of the children's museums is that we are a real community resource. And I think every single one of us could say, we have these beautiful exhibits and these fantastic buildings, but then we also have very large teams that are really devoted to meeting the needs of our communities. And I think that's such a big part of the Children's Museum story. It's something that I think a lot about. I worked here 27 years ago as an intern and the startup team. I then left to become an arts administrator and fundraiser. I brought my children here to the museum and actually had a horrible experience as a parent. One of my child had behavioral issues. The other was socially unable to integrate himself. And as a parent, I know what it's like to have a bad experience in a children's museum with a child that isn't able to function in the space. And so I came back to the museum 4 years ago, specifically with a focus on how do you support the caregiver at whatever level they are. And so I think our focus at the museum right now is really on supporting the child, but also making sure that the caregiver, whether it be an aunt, uncle, foster parent, mom, dad, whoever, has the resources that they need to take care of their children. And Port Discovery was actually, they changed the logistics around a couple years ago so that parents wouldn't be able to sit and relax, so that they wouldn't play on their phones and they would play. And I think that actually backfired for us here at Port Discovery, because what we know is that parents are tired and they want to relax when they're with their kids. Their kids are sometimes happy, just like playing with a piece of paper, but their parents, if they feel uncomfortable, they'll rush them and they will say, come on, let's go, let's do something else. And so we're really spending a lot of time here at Port Discovery figuring out how to make, I'm just going to use mom as an example, mom feel relaxed in the space. Is it the smell of coffee? Is it a seat? Is it a nursing room? Whatever the parent or caregiver needs. And so we also took a look at our outreach programs, which were primarily in the schools. We were sending teams out, and I was worried about how much the kids were really getting from that experience. And so our particular children's museum changed our outreach model, and it's all family-based caregiver support programs. So really a deep focus on multi-generational parenting approaches, bedtime routines, whatever the community needs. And I think that's something everybody's mentioned, but really a focus on one community may need something completely different than another community. And so every one of our, what they're called cohorts, are customized based on what the community is asking for. And just like, well, actually everybody, we have probably over 1,000 different nonprofit participants where we work with the different nonprofit to provide services and in partnership versus us being, saying, here's what we know about your community. And so I think that's the unique thing about all of children's museums in the US, at least, is just a really deep dive into learning what families need and figuring out how to provide the resources that they need. So from a structural perspective, we have a museum that's 25 years old, which would seem kind of young, except that children's museums take a huge, huge, huge beating. It's why a lot of the museums are closed in September for maintenance, which is different than an art museum or other spaces. Kids are fantastically wild and rough and adventuresome, and they really take a beating. So I think when designing children's museums and exhibits, thinking about that is just a big part of what we're doing here. And so we are in the middle of redesigning our whole museum from top to bottom. And so I hope in 5 years, the group from the Netherlands comes and visits us, because I think we're doing a lot of change here. And a lot of that, once again, what does the community need right now and how can we serve it best? And I'll just show you a quick video, not a video, just a quick share of our museum, just so you can see it. 2 seconds.
Sure.
It is the indoor of a ship, inside of a ship port. We are in a port in Baltimore, Maryland. So just like Denise, you cannot move Port Discovery to another location because this is our port of Baltimore with a ship crashing into the building. And the outside, we are an old historic fish market building that was once a fish market and was converted into a children's museum.
Thank you, Carter. One of the things people talked about, a lot of their outreach and their learning programs and connecting with community. They also have wonderful climbers. Carter has a great climber in her place. There's a lot of fun things for kids to do as well. The outdoor spaces that folk have. They also have toddler spaces in these museums for the littlest ones. And Carter has a great toddler space, and many do as well. So I just want to share that. With that, Femke, I'd love to open it up to your questions or questions from your colleagues and peers. So please, would you start us off with a question?
Sure. I think as a first question, the first thing I wondered, you were talking about a third space between home and school, which is a very nice, evocative idea, I think. And I heard all your stories, and you mentioned preschool, classrooms, your STEM programming. It just sounds to me that you all play such an important educational role. I was just wondering what makes you a museum and not a school or an educational center or educational facility. How does that, maybe that's very different in America. And I was just wondering how you see that spectrum, and what is a museum and what is a school, and where does the one start and the other begin?
Who wants to take that? Anyone?
I'll start that off. We probably all have a different perception on that. So something that we say here in Houston is, I don't want to be like school. I don't want to be school. And the reason why is because we truly believe that schools are so complicated these days and they're so constrained by their time. I don't want to be like a school. I want to be a space that really extends out of school learning in a way that takes advantage of all the other hours in a day, in a year, in a lifeline of human beings from 0 to 99. If I was to be like school or try to line up like school, I would be so much more regimented that I wouldn't be able to do some really cool risk-taking, curiosity types of activities in the museum that really allow kids to be the leaders and we follow them. So we try not to say the word school here at all, but yet we want to complement a person being a lifelong learner.
Anyone else? Carter.
I mean, I think the one thing we probably forgot to talk about was that we're all incredibly based on the science of play and playful learning. And I think we probably should have led with that, because there's so much research about how important play is for children. And I think, at least in the United States, curriculum and reading and math and all of that has really taken a lead, and recess and playtime has really come out of a lot of the schools now. And so we know that children need that, especially, in the younger years, but they need to play. And so I think we probably all should have led with the science of play, and play-based learning is our number one, sort of leads us every day.
And one big difference is in our spaces, the children have agency, which is to say they can decide where they want to engage and how they want to engage, which is not the same in school. And once they decide I want to engage in a certain place, we believe in free play, but most of our museums use guided play, which is to say there's a learning objective. The child picks, I want to play over here, I want to go to the book bodega, I want to go over here, but there's a learning objective that's almost, not obvious necessarily, but the child is learning and growing. And so that's a big difference. This child agency, the family agency, the learning through play is what we do so much better than a formal. So we are the informal learning space, as opposed to schools, which is the very formal, very structured, and less joyful place. So next questions. We want to get to as many questions as possible.
Can I add one more thing?
Oh, sure. Go ahead, Denise. Go ahead.
Also, just understanding that this is a place where you build relationships and you make connections. You may not necessarily, you may be able to do that at school with your peers or at home with your parents, but at here, and I think we can all talk about in our museums, we're creating connections with the entire family and also outside people. For example, for us, we have a special day every month for we call Sensory Saturday. And that's for children who may have some sensory challenges. And the most touching thing I've heard, the feedback I've gotten are from the parents saying, I now have a community of other parents who are going through the same process, because every first Saturday of the month, I get to see other parents who have children with other challenges, and now they get to support each other. And so here is a connection that's been made here at the museum of parents from all over New York City who have come together, and they've shared their stories about being a parent with a child with some kind of learning difference or a physical challenge. And so we build relationships and make connections here at our museums.
Thank you, Denise. Okay.
I had a question in the chat, and do keep them coming, everyone, by Marielle Bals. She was wondering, and that's kind of in line with the previous question, what kind of objects do you have? And maybe that is different in the US as opposed to in Holland as well, but over here, museums are always centered around original objects, whether they be historical or art or science museums usually have a base of, scientific instruments or natural history treasures. And we were wondering, or she was wondering, what kind of objects do you have, and how do they, how is the balance between the objects and your spaces?
Well, I'm going to start with the response, and then any one of you pick up. The first thing I'll say is that the big difference in children's museums is that most other museums focus on collections and objects, and children's museums focus on the people, the children, and the families. So we have objects and we have artifacts in our places, but our focus is not on collections and building and storing collections. It's on engaging and lifting up people, children, and their families. So I'll start with that. And now who wants to jump in and add to that, or subtract or multiply? Anyone?
Well, I'll just say a couple things that, reading the question, we do some things we would never do in a fancy museum. We allow food, we allow drink. People can walk through with their big coffee. And once in a while they drop it, and that's a bummer. And then we got to clean the carpet. But that's just, part of the business. These family science nights I mentioned, whatever it was, 50 nights a year, we serve pizza, we serve drinks. So that's families and kids run around, so it's if that's the time they're going to be here, and if that's the time they need a meal, then we need them to get that done and not kick them out here. And so that's a very specific choice, which is a simple one, but also has big consequences.
Because do you have a collection, Joe?
In our collection is hands-on exhibits in the akin to what is at Nemo. So they're not we don't have a registrar, they're not collections, and these are not precious. Well, they're precious to us, but
They
they're
are
not
replaceable.
That's right.
Yeah.
And we have a full-time staff. We build all our own exhibits. We maintain all our own exhibits. So it's just a different kind of thing that way.
Mm-hmm. We have a few collections, like very, very few, and they're hidden. But people have passed away, or they've had something in their home and they want to deed to the museum. We really try not to do that. We have not done that in years. And they may be in a glass case up high. For example, we have these ceramic bowls. Well, it's a children's museum. The last thing you want is a ceramic bowls. And we have a number of them. When I think of collections here, we're about building memories, and we feel as though the collection is the memories that are being built for families. But over time, for example, we had this ginormous statue that was called Telephone Man. He was made out of old telephones. He was maybe over 14 feet tall. And he's on vacation. He recently went away for vacation because he's been working hard and standing for a long time. And what we learned is that as visitors came in, they're like, where is Telephone Man? Like he became this object of love, and he wasn't interactive or doing anything anymore, but it was that memory. So we started to ask ourselves, like, maybe we're, what does a collection mean to us, and what does it mean when it leaves the space? And parents who are like, I remember him when he was small. Like, what can we do to help build and continue those memories?
So here at the Bronx Children's Museum, we do have a collection. We call it the ABC collection, About Building Community collection. And every single art exhibit was developed with a different school. And so the kids got to learn the exhibit design and development process along with us as we were building the museum. And so our water mandala that we have hanging in our entrance, we worked with schools to study the water cycle and the moon cycle. And then they created their own depiction of what they thought that would look like. And so our artist who developed the water mandala, she collected the kids' work and then created a glass sculpture that hangs from our entrance based on what the kids designed. And then we do have art that's a huge wall was been blown up, and it was developed by a 10-year-old. And so he comes in here and he puts his arms up because I made this. And he's so proud of the fact that he, at 10 years old, has something exhibited at the museum. But every exhibit here in the museum was developed with a different school, and they got to learn that entire process. And so that art development process has been embedded in the way we develop different exhibits. And so we're about to make some changes, and we're identifying schools who are going to be our partner. Our first one is our First Nation exhibit, which celebrates what the Bronx looked like pre-colonial times. And so we're going to be studying the topography of the Bronx with a local Bronx school, and they'll get to learn about the Native Americans and then what the Bronx looked like. And then we're going to build it with the New York Botanical Gardens. And so
but you wouldn't, for instance, loan or somehow show original artifacts from that era.
So that's what we're working through now with the Botanical Gardens. Yeah. So this is a whole process. The kids will have say in how that exhibit will look like. And they have a say in everything that's developed here.
But it's so interesting, I think, to hear how your focus really is on the connections and the children and the play and the joy. And for us, and I think I speak for most of the museums who are attending today, maybe except Nemo, collections are central, and museums are a place where you cannot do a lot of things. You can't run, you can't shout, you can't eat, you know. So that's no fun. So that's such sort of in my mind. How could we? So I wonder, do you have any advice for art museums or history museums who do have their glass cases and the paintings on the wall, how can we be more like you?
I think it's
Start with
focusing
a
on the
small-
process. Sorry, go ahead.
No, you go ahead.
I think focusing on the process and less the product. This is where children learn those skills. So when they're painting and they're developing these little muscles so that they can write, that's our focus. It's that process. And so for us, it's the process and the children that are at the center of what we do. I'm sorry, Dana, go ahead.
I would suggest start with a small space. Find one place in your museum that you can put plexiglass over the things that you're worried about and let families start engaging. Listen to your audience. What would they like to do? Would they like the opportunity to paint themselves? Give a very open-ended, let the children be in charge and direct that. But even if you have a small spot where they can just begin to let families be in charge, that will evolve on its own. The more you listen and the more you provide those supplies, it doesn't have to be that the entire thing becomes hands-on. But what you'll find is when it is hands-on, people want to come back for repeat visits. It's more engaging, and you'll start to see those joyful moments and that, aha, this is fabulous. And the kids may end up creating something that you want to display that becomes a part of your collection.
I think that's wonderful. It's one of the hacks one of our attendants is asking for. What would be your recommendations to hack a more traditional object-oriented museum into being more family or child-friendly? Anyone else? We love these recommendations. It's a very good one, Dené. Thank you.
I would say that kids don't mind a repetitive coming back and seeing something more than once or twice. And so there's always this pressure in museums to like evolve and change all the time, but kids are like they could do an art project, engage in something, and then a month later, you don't necessarily need to change it out as much because kids don't mind, or maybe, you know, it's a variation. But I think there's always the pressure with museums of like changing exhibits and creating something different. But, you know, a child that reads the same story twice, that's not a disappointment for them, you know, to come back and say, I did that. Well, that actually might be something they look forward to.
That's a good one.
And I think it's just getting out of our adult brain sometimes, you know, and think through the lens of someone who's 3 feet tall and someone who's 3 or 4 years old. You know, sometimes parents do come in here, especially our immigrant families who there are no children's museums in Latin America. There are no children's museums in Africa. And so when they come in and they're used to an adult model, they'll say, can my child touch? And we're like, please have your child touch, and reminding them, let's stop thinking like adults while you're here and think about what your child needs. And that will, I think that informs so much.
There was another interesting question in our chat.
Yeah,
that is kind of related. And it says, I wonder if adults without children are encouraged or even allowed to visit the museum, and how do they give them a meaningful visit? Or how do you give them a meaningful visit?
I'll take my old answer and put it to this question. I think, and this is hard. I mean, even with our type of exhibits, when I got here 12 years ago, we were very, very proud of those exhibits, and we had a very specific idea of how we thought people should interact and what they should take away. And we were about learning, and we were about our kind of learning. And it took time to sort of give that up. And so to answer this question more appropriately and kind of feed to the last one, you know, I think we have to get over ourselves and what we think a person should get, or what we think the objects are about, or what we think the knowledge or the value of the place is, and let people have fun. And fun's not the right word, because that doesn't sound sophisticated, but you know, there's all kinds of programming you can do, and people will learn, and they will get out of the space what you hope they will. But but you get them there for some other thing, and whether it's adult night. And we, like many of our colleagues, we do adult nights, we do science of beer, science of wine, science of spirits. You know, so we have these times when kids are not allowed, and they have just as much fun, and they learn as well. And so it is really, that was antithetical. That was anathema initially when I got here. There's just we can't do that. That's not right. But so you do have to try some things that will cause some people to be upset, staff, and cause them to quit. And that's a culture change.
Yeah.
I think we need to recognize that we have a job to make museums friendly and museums welcoming. I recently had an intern who just ended his internship with us. He's going back to school. And he said before he interned here at our children's museum, he thought museums weren't welcoming places. He called them trophy cases.
Well, they are. They are so
And
much.
exactly.
So many museums are, if we're honest. How welcoming
And you're
are they?
right.
Yeah.
And this is a 16, 17-year-old boy who's saying, he's never been to a museum because that's how he perceives museums. And so if we want to change the way our youngsters are viewing museums, we have to make it inviting for them and understand how their brains work and how they operate. Because I don't want any 16-year-old to ever say, I've never been to a museum before.
And
We have
Femke,
some other.
I wanted to answer the question about adults and children's museums.
Yeah.
For most children's museums, adults cannot visit the museum without a child for safety reasons. So I just want to mention that. Other than adult nights or special programming, you must come with a child.
I understand. Interesting.
Okay.
And another question was, even if you are serving children, the parents are often the decision makers. So how do you seduce parents? What are, and I think our attendant would like some easy fixes to encourage parents to visit you. How do you make a visit worth it for the parents?
Sure. So I'll start. We're offering parents a way to create their first children's bookshelf. And with our book bodega, families, every time they come, they get another book. And so there's ways of helping parents understand what are the needs. Also, we have programming, for example, for teenage moms, where they are invited to come. They're in a space that's not judgmental in any way. And we provide programming and workshops on various parenting skills. And so there's lots of different ways that we can do that. Does anyone want to share what they've done?
We also do a curated where families can build a family library. So we do have programming that adds into that as well. We've also really, for us, we are seen as a trusted partner for parents of information. And I think in this world where you're getting so much information thrown at you in so many places, being able to be an institution that's highly trusted, knowing that data and information that you get about your child's brain development, about how to best engage with your kids and their learning style, and all of those different types of things, knowing that we're a trusted place, families just naturally come, the parents see us as that, but that's taken years to build that in the community. And so I think it's just become that. I mean, we've used on the other side of the world, our museums are, at least ours is not free. I know when I visit Europe, a lot of museums are free at no cost. And so we have to have a lean and mean sales and marketing team that is always in front of parents as decision makers on how best to use their time, how to, so we run a lot of sales, or we're also making sure to highlight our programming. So that's the other side, the business side of the world, that we've got to be able to constantly be curating a group of parents that see this visit to the museum as a value-added family experience, that they can spend their time, especially here, we're in competition with weekend sports. I mean, that's really our biggest competitor, organized sports, and drawing away from parents' time. Parents are going to sit on a soccer field, but whatever their kids are involved with, how do you create this family value experience to come to the museum district and come to the children's museum?
I was wondering, because you were speaking or touching on the importance of, you know, having it financially organized as a museum. One of the questions was, how important is mediation in your kinds of museums? Because is it possible to have hands-on areas or exhibits without having a museum worker at every exhibit, and you know, which is very expensive?
It is expensive. We have museum guides, museum educators, gallery educators as well throughout our museum. We hire teachers, and especially former preschool teachers, and they're so excited to have this experience. And they're able to engage parents, because teachers have the skill set of being able to engage parents, engage children, and then also foster a really wonderful community. And so we wanted those same skills transferred to our museum. And so we were very intentional about having museum educators throughout the museum.
Joe, please talk about your perspective, Joe, which was not to be so directive and to let people find their way and figure things out. Do you want to talk about that, Joe?
Yeah, sure. I know, and I know it's so different, right? Because we don't have objects that we feel the need to describe. We do have our pedagogy, which is open-ended, divergent outcomes. You know, these are manipulative exhibits that kind of go different directions. We do have people who are very proud and want everyone to do each exhibit right. So we really have to coach our staff to back away from that. It's tricky. I mean, I guess I would say, you know, I think everyone here used either the word welcoming or some, you know, some description of what a welcoming place is. And I think that's the heart of it. And whether it's just easy to get in the door, and whether it's a smile, or whether it's food, or whether it's not bossing people around, you know, just making the space comfortable. Those words can sound trivial a little bit, comfort and welcome, and yet it's the heart of it. I mean, when we do surveys of what if people, you know, if they're getting what they want out of our place, the numbers go up and down really on whether the bathroom is clean and smells good. And as proud as we want to be about all the other things, that falls away if the place does not smell good and look good and feel good from the first moment people come inside. So, you know, I hate to say that. I say this to our educators, and they just, you know, they don't like me. But we have to do it all. We have to do those things, but we also have to get this other part right.
I was wondering, you were talking before, Joe, about that you get state subsidies, or as opposed to many of the US museums, I think. And we do too. Most of the Dutch museums do get state funding, or from the nation or your city or anything in between. And what struck me in most of your stories, I mean, you were talking about how you asked the community what is really important and what they needed, which was prosperity. And you were talking about adults dropping out of community college, and how can you help by, for instance, providing meaningful childcare. In Kansas, you were talking about facilitating families to bond or reunite or even meet. And what you were saying just now, Denise, in the Bronx, creating a safe place for teenage mums. I mean, we get public funding. A lot of our funding is public money. But I wonder if in Holland we think about the responsibility to our community in the same way. And it did make me wonder also, where does it end? You know, gosh, there's so many problems in my town, and I feel almost ashamed to say that I've never really thought about solving them as my responsibility. I'm thinking, you know, I do art and history, and that's really important too. Where does it end?
I'll say one thing. I think I'm in the industry of joy, you know, and so being in the industry of joy, I believe everybody has a right to happiness and play and joy. And so if it's the teen mom or the adult mom or dad or the incarcerated dad or parent or the billionaire, they all have a place here. And every child, no matter what circumstance that you were born into, deserves to have a happy childhood in a place that was customized for you and welcomes you and says you're special. And so that's the lens that, I don't know my colleagues, but that's the lens I come into it for. I'm not in the art industry, I'm in the joy industry.
I don't think we have to solve it all. I think if we can start building that joy, if it's for one family, if you can get a family to come back, every parent wants to see their child be excited. They want to have a wonderful day together. They want to build those memories. And so even if you have an entirely adult-focused place with collections that you are protecting, you can weave interactive experiences throughout your facility that can create joy. And guess what? Adults like to touch and explore things too, very much like children. And so if we can give those opportunities, you can start doing that. And I think identifying what it is in your community, that's that place that you can find the partners. Who wants to work with you on that? Who also wants to solve that? How can you get on board with work that's already being done instead of duplicating something that's happening? I think it a lot of times goes back to that partnership.
Yeah,
Please go ahead, please.
No, I was just going to say a lot of us sort of study from the Fred Rogers Simple Interactions, which could be adapted to any museum, which is just the idea of, your most basic simple interaction can really make a huge impression on an adult or a child. And so, I mean, I know like we send all of our staff through a training program really just based on that. And then just really quickly back to the other thing, half of our exhibits are not staffed. And so I know that was a question, and we do have many exhibits that do not require staff. So I just thought.
I just wanted to say, your question about you have all these needs and you can't solve all these. Mother Teresa said years ago, if you can't feed 100, then feed just one. Pick an issue that you can impact within, the realm of your art space, and start there. I'm sorry, Joe, you can say something.
No, to that point, I mean, we heard 7 things. We'd heard hundreds of things. They distilled to 7. We chose 2. People wanted walkable neighborhoods. They wanted not to be shot by the police. They wanted better supermarkets closer to their homes. These are things that we decided those weren't our expertise and our passion. So, you hear lots of things and then you decide how does it overlap with your passion and your mission.
We all can create joy, right? We can do that. That's great. We're almost out of time. Femke, did you want to say anything as a wrap up before?
Well, I think, no, I just want to say thank you. And I think some people left, but I know they had to go early and was really sorry to leave. And I think we just all enjoyed your stories tremendously. And the one thing that sticks in my mind or in my heart really is that we are the question, how do we serve our community? And especially since we're publicly funded in Holland, that should be the #1 question on our minds. And it's not on my mind enough. So yeah, I take that. And people are still putting in questions and remarks, but I think, yeah, what can we say? It was wonderful. And actually, Elsa Bailey, who's with ICOM US, said in November, there's a conference in Athens of ICOM Seeker. So that's the sort of educational international committee. So anyone can join that committee and come to the conference and continue this conversation live in Greece. What's not to like? And I think you also pointed out, Arthur, that we can visit your website and find some more info there.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. We had 110 at one point, I saw.
Yeah.
So that's a great number turnout. Thank you, my colleagues. I always learn something when I hear my brilliant leaders talking about their great work, and it makes me so proud to be connected to these great museum leaders. And Femke, you can share their contact information if people want to reach out.
That would be
happy to-
lovely.
Yeah, so we'd be happy to continue to share our thoughts if we can be helpful to you all. So thank you so much. Thank you
sure you
again. Thank
can.
you for your leadership, Femke.
No, it was my pleasure. Thank you. Have a good day. Ours is
Yes.
finishing, but yours is starting.
Yes.
Can we give everybody a round of
Yes.
applause?
Yeah.
A round of applause.
There you go. Yes, thank you, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
All
all.
right.
everyone.
Take care.
Thank you. En dank jullie wel, alle deelnemers. Fijne avond. Tot de volgende keer bij ICOM.
I agree with that.
Oh, wonderful.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Yay.